Okay, back again, this time with collect requirements. Collect requirements is a very important step because requirements, remember, should be detailed enough to be measurable during the execution process group. Requirements should be detailed enough to be measurable. Very important point, okay? So we collect requirements. We're determining the stakeholders' needs, and it provides us a basis then for defining the product scope and the project scope along with it. The PMBOK guide doesn't specifically address product requirements because those are largely industry specific, but all you have to do is be aware of the product and project scope. It's the same. Remember, the product scope is long-term beyond the project through the life cycle, the entire life cycle of the product, whereas the project scope is limited to within the project itself to create the deliverable that is deemed success for your project. So the project success is directly influenced by active stakeholder involvement, and we see it in the discovery process of collect requirements. Requirements then become next, in the next lesson, a foundation of the work breakdown structure, which is going to list everything required to do the project, the work and only the work required in the project. So here we go, our inputs, including the project management plan. Why? Because we just completed the scope management plan, and how we manage scope is also going to inform us on how we collect requirements. The same as the requirements management plan, how we prioritize and analyze requirements. The how is listed in the requirements management plan. And then, of course, since we're engaging stakeholders, it makes sense that we would want the stakeholder engagement plan, just to name a few parts of the project plan. The charter, again, giving us high-level scope, high-level requirements is necessary. Project documents. I am making assumptions along the way, and the assumptions log also includes constraints. Assumptions and constraints, we want to collect those. Our lessons learned and our stakeholder register would be good project documents. Remember, documents are active things that I can work on, change, update. I can add stakeholders as I find them in the collect requirements process. I don't need integrated change control for that. The other one listed is the business documents, which includes the business case that was discussed back in week 1. The business case, which can describe the required or desired criteria to meet the business needs. Remember, that's what the business case does. It meets what business need are we meeting by having this project. So then we're going to collect the requirements using these tools. Expert judgment, we've been over many times. Data gathering includes brainstorming, doing interviews. I do all of those. Focus groups I don't do so much of, but when I was active duty, we would get people together and have a focus group. These are people with varying levels of knowledge at various ranks. You get them in a room and you ask questions and you chart and affinitize or group those. You might do questionnaires or surveys. Some people will use SurveyMonkey for that. And I can use benchmarking. I can take other great best practices and apply them. There's data analysis, which is often used. Data analysis isn't limited to just document analysis. We want to use other ways to elicit requirements. I might even do a request for proposal, which is something we'll talk about in procurement management. How do I get people to submit me their ideas and their cost for conducting this project? I might do use cases is a very helpful way. What are the ways that something can be used, and how would that define assumptions, constraints, and requirements? You kind of map out at the activity with active participants and how they would engage. So say I have an ATM machine. I would do use cases on how an active participant would engage the ATM machine in even various times of the day or night, and how the machine will respond. Use cases. I can do decision making, which often comes in these two criteria. Decision making is voting, and it has multi-criteria analysis. There's also autocratic decision making. I can just decide that I'm going to do something and take responsibility for it. In voting, there are some key words like unanimity. We're all familiar with unanimous, a majority decision, over 50%, but the one that is less common is called plurality. And this, so if I have multiple blocks of voters, and I end up with 32% here, and 18% there, and 25% here, and 24% here, and a 1% here, I'm going to go with the 32%. It's the largest of the minorities, and that's called a plurality. Data representation is about affinitization. This is grouping of like items, and mind mapping, which I believe we've discussed in a previous lesson. Now, for interpersonal skills, it mentions nominal group techniques. Nominal group technique is brainstorming and then ranking the ideas. So it's brainstorming plus, which is brainstorming and ranking the ideas. Facilitation techniques, putting people together, key stakeholders, like in a workshop. It helps to build trust, foster relationships, and improve communications. All very good tools to collect requirements. And I can also build a prototype. I can build a small-scale model of what I'm trying to do, which will also provide or illuminate other requirements. Here's a quick quiz. You may pause the video, read the questions, and then let me know what you write down what you think. Okay, hopefully you've had a chance to review these. The group decision-making techniques, the Director of Personnel is the subject matter expert, and they have decided to use a systematic approach using the criteria of a participant, risk, and corporate valuation. A decision matrix was the tool chosen by the team. So think about how that might be applied. Also, the other one has the various levels of votes. Again, we just defined those. Okay. Collect requirements. Then I have these outputs for collect requirements. And the outputs include requirements documentation describes how individual requirements meet the business needs. That's requirements documentation. Before we baseline, which we're going to do here in another lesson or two during this week, before being baselined, requirements need to be unambiguous, measurable, testable, traceable, complete, consistent, and acceptable to key stakeholders. Okay? So we can put these requirements documentation also into various classifications. Is it a business requirement? Is it a stakeholder requirement? And is that an individual or group? Is it a solution requirement? What about transitioning the product from the project to operations? Is it that requirement? Quality requirement, etc. And then the other output is my requirements traceability matrix. This is going to directly tie together, linking the requirements and the stakeholders. It gives me a way to trace them throughout the project. So let's take a quick look. Oh, remember requirements documentation, unambiguous. Requirements need to be traceable, complete, consistent, and you could even include acceptable. Okay, to whom? To the stakeholders and the project team. Okay? And these become part of our requirements documentation. Now here is a picture of what might be considered a requirements traceability matrix, the other output. And remember I said it's linking the strategy to the objectives in the project through this requirements traceability matrix, or RTM. You see the linking chains there. It links the requirements, to the strategy, to the project objectives through the stakeholders' work. And so you can see, as I list the requirements description and then the requirements, I give it a reference. Where did that requirement come from? What drives me to include it in the project? Like the charter. It may be in the charter, so it's going to be a requirement. And can I tie it then back to the business case, which is defining my business need, which is really going to give me the opportunity to defend and support the requirements chosen for this project. Okay, that is all for collect requirements. I enjoyed it, and we will pick it up again in a few minutes.